It's Chris with Implied Music, and I'm super busy right now writing on a film. So I'm looking into my archive and pulling out material which maybe didn't get the attention it deserved at first. And today's video is about borrowed chords, borrowing chords from the relative minor. We can get some interesting textures that way. We can vitalize existing progressions that, maybe need a little extra love, and also just sort of stimulate our creativity a bit. So it's sort of a simple solution, and well, let's just take a look at it. Where do you borrow your chords from? Diatonic chords are great for functional harmony, but for that epic sound, you want some surprising chords, right? Well, one way to think about it is by knowing your relative minors. Okay, we'll talk about borrowing things and what's good to borrow in a moment, but first, listen to this little melody and chord progression. 4, 5, 3, 6. Major 4, major 5, minor 3, minor 6. It's called the Royal Road chord progression. It's huge in Asian pop music, and we hear it in Western pop as well. Well, what we get is, in the key of C, F, G, E minor, A minor. Of course, those are diatonic chords. They appear just really naturally in the key of C. But while that is, an okay kind of pop melody, it doesn't really have any surprise or punch. I want to switch out some of those chords for a little juice. Well, take a look at this next example. We'll just listen to it and then talk about what makes it tick. If you're like me, the first thing you noticed were the melodic adjustments. And the melodic adjustments were made because I changed some of the chordal qualities. In this example, the roots don't change. F, G, E, A. F, G, E, A. However, I've changed the chord qualities, and how I changed them was based on my knowledge of relative minors. Okay, so first of all, the first thing you learn when you learn about borrowing chords is that you can borrow from the parallel minor. I can borrow chords from C minor to use in C major. And of course, rock musicians do that all the time. I'm in C. I play the E flat chord, which is flat 3. I play the B flat chord, which is flat 7 C. So sort of a 60s sound, isn't it? Well, that means that I'm taking chords from C minor, or we can think about that as E flat major, because C minor is the relative minor of E flat major. In other words, there's a relative minor relationship going on here, right? E flat major has a set of chords. C minor is the relative minor of E flat major. And what that suggests to me is that we can look at the relative minor of C, which is A minor, and borrow chords from that. Cool idea, right? But you're like, hey, relative minor of C is A minor, and that has all the same chords. Well, sort of, except for this one thing. Take a look at this. I need to show you this. So if A minor, typically what we do is make the 5 chord in A minor E major. We need that G sharp. That's the harmonic minor. The harmonic minor is a great source of chords for me here. And that means that my 7 chord could be G sharp diminished. I could also expand the notion and say ascending melodic minor. The A minor is the 1 chord. The 4 chord is D major because of the F sharp. The 5 chord is E major because of the G sharp, and then I'm back to A minor. They're all available to me. Now that I know that I can switch C minor and E flat major and think about them as relatives, I can apply that same rule to my borrowed chord idea. I hope this is clear. Let's look at this example and maybe it will make more sense. Now, we heard it, but then it disappeared. So let's listen one more time and we'll talk it through. I start with F minor, simple borrowed chord from C minor, G major, E major. That's from the A minor system and it resolves to A minor. F minor again to G. The E major, A minor really gives you a strong A minor sound, doesn't it? And if you notice, the melody's adjusted in order to correspond to those new notes. For the F minor chord, I need A flat. Oddly enough, for the E chord, I need G sharp. And look how they are the same note. They're the same key. They're not the same note. Spelling-wise, they're different. They're enharmonic equivalents. That particular tone is like a magic tone in melody, and do you notice how it gives us an epic sound? F minor, very dark. To G, sounds like we're in C minor, but no, that E major is so interesting. All right, so I've gone on. So in my next example, I've borrowed chords both from the A harmonic minor scale, the G is going to be G sharp diminished, and the E flat major scale. The E is going to be E flat major, the A is going to be A flat major. Now this is a strong sound and I've had to adjust a bunch of melodic tones as well. Very surprising. G sharp diminished, E flat major. Sun came out, right? And then it pulls back. Big tense moment. And there are some surprising moments in there as well. Because I didn't adjust every melodic tone, we're getting Lydian scale sounds, the A, for instance, right here, over the E flat. And I don't know if you noticed it, but back in the second example, over the E major chord, the C, that weird suspension, a flat 13, is a pretty spicy sound, has a kind of a Stranger Things element. Yeah. Both of these approaches, borrowing chords from E flat major for use in the C chord, think of it as the parallel minor, and then going to the relative minor of C and borrowing chords from A harmonic minor gives me some really interesting textures, suggests some unusual melodic qualities, and just generally speaking gives me a pretty strong sound, a sound that I probably wouldn't have gotten to, I guess I'll say intuitively. It's easy to write that first example, the sort of intuitive major melody thing. And then working at it a little bit more and saying, how can I substitute, gave me two really interesting substitutions. They can all appear in my piece of music, especially if I'm scoring to picture. I need different emotional qualities. And these borrowed chords give me a kind of a diverse perspective on my original melody that's incredibly useful for underscoring narrative and, generally speaking, creating complicated moods. And the world is a complicated place. Well, I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe and ding the bell. You'll be notified when I do my videos. I'll see you next time.